My name is Clara, and today is my 30th birthday. At my own birthday dinner, my mother and brother pushed aside the gift I'd poured my soul into in order to celebrate my brother's latest failure. What they didn't know was that the most powerful man in the city was sitting at our table, and he was about to make an announcement that would change everything. If you're watching this from somewhere where family drama hits close to home, take a moment to like and subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how I handled what came next. Before I tell you about that fateful birthday dinner, you need to understand my family. On the surface, we were the picture of suburban normalcy. My father, Thomas, was a soon-to-be retired accountant, a man who believed in numbers and stability. My mother, Eleanor, a retired history teacher who romanticized the past and the roads not taken. And then there was my brother, Leo, 2 years my senior. And me, Clara, an urban planner for the city, a job that was steady, responsible, and in my family's words, safe. But beneath that surface, our family operated on one unspoken rule. Leo was the sun, and I was just a planet in his orbit. Leo was the golden child, the big dreamer, the one with the entrepreneurial spirit. I was the responsible one, the one with the practical head on her shoulders. These phrases weren't compliments. They were the boxes they'd locked me in since childhood. This injustice wasn't a single event. It was the air we breathed. I remember when I was 18, I won a full academic scholarship to one of the top architectural programs in the country. I had worked tirelessly, spending my nights perfecting my portfolio. When the acceptance letter came, I ran downstairs, waving it like a victory flag. My father glanced at it over his reading glasses and said, "Good Clara. At least one of you will be debt-free." My mother smiled and said, "That's wonderful, dear. This means we can help Leo with his research trip to Europe." Leo's research trip was a 3-month backpacking tour he claimed was essential to find himself after failing most of his freshman year of college. They used the money they'd saved for my tuition to fund it because, as they explained, Leo needs a boost, Clara. You've already got yourself sorted. I smiled and nodded, swallowing my disappointment. That was my role, the capable one, the stable one, the one who cleared the path for Leo's whimsical dreams. As the years went on, this pattern only solidified. Leo bounced from one startup idea to the next, each one flashier than the last and funded by another loan from our parents. There was the gourmet pet food delivery app, the line of eco-friendly t-shirts made in a questionable factory, and a social media platform exclusively for influencers. Each time my parents lauded his vision and courage, and each time one failed, they'd take out another mortgage on their home to bail him out, while I quietly paid off my student loans and contributed to their bills. Meanwhile, I was building my career in the shadows. I loved my work, shaping public spaces, designing parks, and making my city more livable. But to my parents, it was just a desk job. It didn't have the glamour or the moonshot potential of Leo's ventures. "Are you sure you don't want to do something more creative, Clara?" My mother would often ask, forgetting that my entire job was about creation. "Maybe you could help Leo with his business plan. You're so good with those little details." They treated me as a resource, a personal accountant and unpaid therapist for my brother. I spent countless hours reviewing his spreadsheets, pointing out glaring errors he'd ignore. I listened for hours to his rants about how the world didn't recognize his genius. And through it all, I never got a thank you. My help was expected, my presence taken for granted. The deepest wound came a few years ago. My father passed away suddenly from a heart attack, leaving behind a void and a mountain of debt from Leo's failed businesses. It was I who sorted through the finances, who negotiated with creditors, and who figured out a way for my mother to keep the house. Leo disappeared for 3 weeks, claiming he was too grief-stricken to deal with numbers. When he re-emerged, it was to ask if there was any insurance money that could fund his next big idea. It was then that I started working on what I called the Greenway Project. It was my dream, an ambitious plan to turn a massive, abandoned industrial sector downtown into a public green space with walking trails, community gardens, and arts hubs. I worked on it at night and on weekends, pouring all my grief and frustration into the designs and proposals. To me, it was more than a project. It was a way to create something beautiful from decay. When I tried to explain that to my mother, she just patted my hand and said, "It's good to have a hobby, dear. It keeps your mind occupied." A hobby. That's all she saw. She didn't see the thousands of hours of research, the sleepless nights, and the burning passion that drove me. She and Leo didn't see me. They only saw the convenient, reliable shadow they were used to. And as my 30th birthday approached, a naive part of me still hoped that this time, maybe this time, it would be different. I thought I could endure it, but I had no idea that the coming dinner would be more than another slight. It would be a public humiliation and the catalyst that would change my life forever. It wasn't a winning lottery ticket or the reading of a will. It was something much quieter and perhaps more painful because of it, my 30th birthday. In my family, milestones were a big deal, at least for Leo. His 30th had been a lavish affair at a chic restaurant fully funded by my parents even as they were struggling with bills. Dozens of people had come, all raising a glass to the genius who was about to change the world. For me, I wanted one thing: acknowledgement. I didn't need a big party. I just wanted a quiet dinner where for one night the conversation might revolve around me, where my accomplishments could be recognized and my dreams could be taken seriously. I told my mother that all I wanted was a family dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, Trattoria Sofia. And I had a special gift I wanted to share with them. That gift was my soul in physical form. For the past 6 months, I had spent hundreds of hours constructing a detailed architectural model of the Greenway project. It wasn't just a blueprint. It was a meticulously handcrafted 3D miniature, complete with tiny trees, winding paths, and repurposed buildings. It was beautiful. It was my best work, and it represented all my hopes for the future, both for the city and for myself. I had carefully encased it in an acrylic display box and planned to present it to my mother at dinner as a way to finally make her understand what my work meant. When the day arrived, a sense of cautious optimism fluttered inside me. My mother had seemed excited on the phone, talking about how she couldn't wait to celebrate her special girl. Leo even promised to take a break from changing the world for a few hours to be there. I chose my outfit carefully, an elegant blue dress that made me feel professional yet festive. As I arrived at the restaurant carrying the large box with care, I felt a flicker of hope. They were already there, settled into a cozy corner booth. My mother hugged me tightly. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. 30 looks good on you." Leo was scrolling on his phone, but he looked up long enough to say, "Hey, Clara. Happy birthday." The start felt promising. We ordered drinks, and for about 10 minutes, the conversation actually centered on me. They asked about my job, and I answered enthusiastically, feeling a sense of relief. "Actually," I said, unable to contain my excitement any longer, "I have something I want to show you." I placed the large box on the table. My mother looked at it with curiosity. "Oh, Clara, you didn't have to bring a gift to your own birthday." "It's a gift for you," I explained, my voice a little shaky. "It's what I've been working on." I lifted the acrylic lid. Even in the dim light of the restaurant, the model glowed. The intricate details, the balance of green space and architecture, it was breathtaking. "This," I said softly, "this is my Greenway project." My mother squinted at it. "Oh, it's quaint, dear. Did you make all these little trees yourself?" Quaint was not the word I was hoping for. Leo gave it a passing glance before returning to his phone. "Looks like it took a lot of time," he commented. Disappointment was a cold stone in my stomach, but I pushed through it. "It's more than that, Mom. It's a real proposal. I've been presenting it to the—" "Speaking of proposals," Leo interrupted, finally putting his phone down. His face was alight with the self-satisfied fervor I knew all too well. "I have a huge announcement." And just like that, the catalyst was triggered. The table's attention swiveled from my model to Leo as if a switch had been flipped. My mother leaned forward, her eyes bright. "Tell me, honey, is it good news? It's game-changing news," Leo declared. "You know my networking platform, ConnectSphere? Well, I'm about to completely revolutionize it. We're pivoting to blockchain. I'm calling it CryptoNect." I looked at my model, my masterpiece, forgotten in the middle of the table. My small hope for one night that was mine had already evaporated. The dinner hadn't really begun, but I already knew how it would end. I had no idea this was only the beginning of the humiliation, and that before the night was over, my little hobby was about to collide with their world in the most spectacular way possible. For the next 2 hours, I became invisible. My 30th birthday dinner transformed into an impromptu investor pitch for Leo's latest fantasy project. My model, the work I had poured my heart into, sat on the table like a forgotten centerpiece, occasionally jostled by Leo's elbow as he gesticulated wildly. The escalation was methodical, each layer of disrespect piling onto the last until I felt I could barely breathe. The first incident was the complete dismissal. After Leo's initial announcement, my mother was utterly captivated. "Blockchain, that sounds so impressive, honey. Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Leo, whose knowledge of blockchain was close to zero, launched into a long-winded, jargon-filled speech he'd clearly memorized from a YouTube video. He spoke of decentralization NFTs for business contacts and exponential growth potential. I tried to interject gently. "Actually, I don't think the technology quite works that way, Leo." "Clara, please," my mother, cut in her eyes, not leaving him. "Don't discourage your brother. Not everyone can think outside the box like he does." I fell silent. I, the person with an honors degree who spent her career understanding complex systems, was being told to be quiet so a college dropout could misrepresent basic technology. It was a slap in the face, but it was only the beginning. The second incident was the demeaning comparison. After the waiter brought our main courses, my mother looked at me with what she thought was a kind smile. "You know, Clara, I'm so proud of you. You have a stable job, a safe life. That's wonderful." She turned to Leo. "But Leo, he's a risk taker. He's not afraid to fail. That's what makes great men, you know. Like Elon Musk." The absurdity of comparing Leo, who had been burning through family money for a decade, to Elon Musk almost made me laugh. But the sting behind her words was no joke. She was saying my stability was a weakness, that my carefully built career was a sign of a lack of ambition. She was praising his recklessness while devaluing my diligence. "I don't think of my job as safe, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It's challenging. It impacts thousands of people." "Oh, of course, dear," she said dismissively before turning right back to Leo. "So how much initial capital will you need for CryptoNect?" The third incident was the blatant exploitation. Leo, emboldened by my mother's adoration, turned to me. "Actually, Clara, I'm glad you're here. You know you're so good with the details. I was thinking maybe you could look over my financials. Just make sure the numbers add up. I don't have time for that small stuff." I stared at him. Not only was he hijacking my birthday dinner, he wanted me to do free labor for him. He wanted me to use my expertise to prop up his delusion. "You want me to spend my free time fixing the errors in your business plan?" I asked, disbelief thick in my voice. "Exactly," he said, completely missing the sarcasm. "That's what family is for, right? We help each other out." "Leo's right, Clara," my mother chimed in. "It would only take you an evening or two, and it would mean the world to your brother." I felt the walls closing in. They weren't just ignoring me. They were actively trying to write me into their story as a supporting character in Leo's epic. Throughout all of this, there was a silent presence at our table. A few weeks prior, I had invited a mentor from my work to join us. I told my mother he was a senior planner who had been helping me with my career, and I wanted him to meet my family. The truth was far more complex. His name was Mayor Robert Thompson. Mayor Thompson was a man in his 60s with silver hair and a quiet composure that radiated authority without having to speak a word. He had been observing the entire spectacle with a quiet, knowing amusement, only occasionally nodding or taking a sip of water. My mother and Leo, too absorbed in their own performance, had barely registered him beyond the initial introductions. They assumed he was just some boring colleague of mine. But Mayor Thompson and I had been exchanging glances across the table. He saw my patience wearing thin. He saw the way my shoulders slumped just a little more with each dismissive comment. In his eyes, I saw not pity, but affirmation. His gaze said, "I see what's happening. You're not crazy." This external affirmation, as quiet as it was the only thing keeping me from breaking down. It was a reminder that the world outside the suffocating bubble of my family saw me differently. To my mother and Leo, I was a functionary. But to the most powerful man in the city, I was a visionary. By the time the waiter brought out a small slice of tiramisu with a single candle, I was almost numb. They sang a mechanical happy birthday, their minds clearly still on CryptoNect. As I blew out the candle, I didn't make a wish. I knew no wish could fix this. After I blew out the candle, Leo did something that made my breath catch in my throat. He took his messy stack of napkins, the ones he'd been scribbling his business plan on, and physically pushed my architectural model aside to make more room on the table. The motion was casual, thoughtless, but it was a gut punch. He had shoved aside my life's work, the symbol of my dreams, as if it were a dirty ashtray. I watched his hand on my model, and then I looked at my mother, who didn't even blink. She just smiled at Leo, completely oblivious to the violation that had just occurred. And I knew that my endurance had finally reached its end. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were erasing me. And I wasn't going to let that happen. The last straw wasn't a shout, but a small, almost silent action. It was the way Leo, with a completely unthinking entitlement, slid his scribbled-on napkins across the table and in doing so used the back of his hand to shove my Greenway project model aside. The model skidded a few inches on the polished wood, and one of the tiny, delicate trees I had spent hours crafting came loose and toppled over. No one else at the table seemed to notice. My mother was too busy listening to Leo explain how the logo had to be disruptive. But to me, that casual shove felt like an earthquake. It was a physical manifestation of my entire life being pushed aside, being deemed unimportant, being unceremoniously sacrificed for whatever whim was currently occupying Leo's mind. That tiny tree lying on its side on its miniature path felt like a piece of me overturned and ignored. "Leo," I said, and my voice came out so sharp and clear, it surprised even me. "You just knocked over a tree." He glanced down. "Oh, sorry. Anyway, about the logo." "No," I interrupted. "Don't you get it? You just dismissed hundreds of hours of my work as if it were trash." My mother finally registered the tension. She placed a hand on my arm. "Clara, don't be so sensitive. It was an accident. Your brother is trying to explain something important." "More important than my birthday?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "More important than the gift I spent 6 months making for you? This is the one night of the year I asked for the focus to be on me, and you two couldn't even grant me that." Leo was now annoyed. "Come on, Clara. Don't ruin the evening with your drama. I'm talking about my future here." "And what about my future, Leo?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Does my future not exist? Does my hobby not deserve 5 minutes of serious consideration?" That's when my mother said the words that broke something inside me for good. She looked at me with genuine disappointment, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Clara, you're being selfish. Your brother is on the verge of something big, and it could benefit the whole family. Your job, well, it will always be there. It's stable, it's safe." She paused, then added, "Maybe it's time you gave up on these little projects and focused on supporting the people who are actually trying to build something big." "Gave up on these little projects?" The words echoed in the sudden silence at the table. She wasn't just devaluing my work. She was telling me my place in life was to support someone else's greatness, never to pursue my own. She was telling me my dreams were too small to exist alongside Leo's. In that moment, a cold calm washed over me. The hurt was gone, replaced by a painful, piercing clarity. I had spent 30 years trying to win their approval, hoping that one day they would see me. I now realized the devastating truth: they never would. They couldn't, because they had chosen not to. It was easier to keep me in my small, responsible box. It fit their narrative. I glanced across the table at Mayor Thompson. He was looking directly at me, not with pity, but with a silent question in his eyes. "What are you going to do now, Clara?" And I knew what I was going to do. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for a recognition they were incapable of giving. I took a deep breath and righted the tiny toppled tree on my model. I looked at my mother and Leo, their faces still set in annoyance at my outburst. "You're right, Mom," I said softly. "You are absolutely right. It's time I stopped focusing on these little projects." My mother smiled, a wave of relief washing over her face. "I'm so glad you understand, dear." Leo nodded, his smugness returning. "Great. So, about the financials?" Because I continued, my voice still calm, and even my project isn't little at all. I turned my gaze to Mayor Thompson. "Mayor, I think now would be the perfect time." The awakening wasn't a hot emotion. It was a cold acceptance. I didn't have to break down the door to the box they'd put me in. I realized I'd had the key all along, and I was about to use it. My mother and Leo's faces froze. "Mayor," my mother stammered, her head swiveling to look at the man she had dismissed as my boring colleague for the past 3 hours. Leo squinted, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. The words of my father echoed in my mind, but they held no power anymore. They were like echoes from another life, a version of me that no longer existed. Because I had a secret. My secret began 8 months ago in a dusty city office under fluorescent lights. I had spent weeks trying to get a meeting with anyone in the mayor's office to present my Greenway project. I was stonewalled by assistants and deputies at every turn. My proposal was too ambitious, they said. The city didn't have the funding. In an act of desperation, I did something the responsible Clara would never do. I found Mayor Thompson's public schedule and waited for him outside a community event. As he emerged, I stepped forward, heart-pounding, and handed him a 1-page summary of my project. "Mayor," I said, my voice shaky, "please just give me 5 minutes of your time. That's all I ask." Maybe he saw the desperation in my eyes, or maybe he was simply intrigued by the title, Transforming the Blight. He took the paper. "My office will be in touch," he said, and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. But 2 days later, I got a call. The mayor wanted to see me. That first meeting took place in his private office, a vast room overlooking the harbor. I was terrified, but as I began to speak about my project, the nerves melted away, replaced by passion. I didn't just present numbers and blueprints. I painted a picture of what our city could be. I spoke of environmental justice for low-income neighborhoods, of spaces for local artists, of a green heart for a concrete city. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, staring out the window. "Miss Preston," he said, finally turning back to me. "This is the kind of bold thinking this city has been missing for decades." It was the beginning of a secret partnership. We met weekly, sometimes at City Hall, sometimes more discreetly at coffee shops in far-flung neighborhoods. He connected me with private philanthropists, environmental advocates, and community leaders. Together, we transformed my hobby into a viable, fully funded plan. My secret weapon wasn't just a project. It was an alliance with the most powerful man in the city. They didn't know that the Greenway project was no longer a dream on paper. 3 weeks ago, after months of negotiations, a consortium of private investors backed by city tax incentives committed the full $150 million to fund the project. Their one condition was that the city have a project lead they trusted. Mayor Thompson had nominated me, but I had added a condition of my own. I didn't just want to lead the project. I wanted a stake in it. I presented a business plan not on a napkin, but in a detailed 80-page document showing how the project could become financially self-sustaining through commercial space leases and public-private partnerships. The investors agreed. They weren't just hiring me as the lead designer. They were bringing me in as a minority investor, a true partner. My hobby was about to make me a millionaire. The plan for the birthday dinner was formed shortly after. Mayor Thompson had suggested a grand press conference, but I had asked for something different. I needed to do this for myself first. "Mayor," I had told him, "I have a personal matter to attend to. Would you mind if the official announcement was made at a small family dinner?" He had looked at me with a knowing smile. You want them to hear it from me, don't you? I want them to see they were wrong about everything I had admitted. So the plan was set. I invited him as my mentor, knowing that my mother and Leo, in their self-absorption, would never bother to find out who he really was. I had set the stage for the ultimate confrontation, not with anger, but with undeniable success. Now, sitting in the restaurant looking at the bewildered faces of my mother and Leo, I felt no glee. I felt a strange, quiet peace. I didn't need their approval anymore. I just needed them to witness the truth. I hadn't been weak. I had been strategic. I hadn't been lucky. I had been prepared. While they were dismissing my little projects, I was quietly building an empire. Mayor, I repeated, my voice firm and clear. I believe you have an announcement to make. Mayor Thompson smiled a slow, deliberate smile. He placed his napkin down, rose to his feet, and his presence seemed to fill the room. My mother and Leo stared up at him, finally realizing this man was no ordinary colleague. And I knew that in the next moment their world was about to be turned upside down. As Mayor Thompson rose, the entire dynamic of the table shifted. His presence, which had been quiet and observant all evening, was now commanding. Even diners at nearby tables quieted, sensing the gravity of the moment. My mother and Leo stared at him, mouths slightly agape, the final puzzle pieces clicking into place in their minds. Eleanor Leo, the mayor, began his voice, a low, resonant baritone that carried an unmistakable authority. I must apologize for attending your dinner under somewhat false pretenses. Clara introduced me as her mentor, which is not untrue. She is one of the brightest minds I've had the privilege to advise. But my role in this city, as you may now realize, is a bit broader. My mother swallowed hard, her face paling. You're Mayor Thompson. I am, he said with a slight nod. And I'm here tonight not just to celebrate Clara's 30th birthday, but to celebrate the beginning of a new era for our city, an era being led by your daughter's vision. Leo looked as if he'd been punched in the stomach. He looked from the mayor to me and back again, his smug confidence dissolving into sheer disbelief. Mayor Thompson gestured toward the model on the table, the gift they had cast aside. This, what you've referred to as a little project tonight, he said, emphasizing each word, is in fact the most significant urban redevelopment plan this city has undertaken in 50 years. This is the Westwood Greenway project. He let the words hang in the air. For the past 8 months, Clara has been working tirelessly with my office and a consortium of private investors to make this vision a reality. This is not a hobby. This is a $150 million venture that will create thousands of jobs, dozens of acres of green space, and will completely reshape our downtown core. The silence was deafening. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the distant clinking of silverware from across the restaurant. My mother looked like she was about to faint. Her eyes were glued to the model as if seeing it for the very first time. But how she whispered, "We didn't know." "That is because Clara is a professional," the mayor replied flatly. "She doesn't talk about what she is going to do, she does it. And she has done what many thought was impossible." He turned to me with a warm smile. And that brings me to the final part of my announcement. The investors and the city have unanimously appointed Clara Preston as the lead designer and project director for the entire Westwood Greenway initiative. Project Director Leo blurted out, his voice cracking with incredulity. "But she works for the city. She's a planner." "Not anymore," the mayor said. As part of the deal, Clara will be resigning from her current position and forming her own firm, Preston Urban Design, which will serve as the primary contractor for this project. Furthermore, he added, delivering the killing blow due to the innovative nature and financial modeling she developed. The investors have invited her to join as an investment partner. To put it simply, she's not just building it. She owns a piece of it. By now, the disbelief on Leo's face had morphed into something else, raw, curdled envy. His entire life had been a performance of chasing the kind of success I had just quietly achieved. All his talk of CryptoNet now sounded hollow and childish. My mother finally found her voice, but it was changed. The condescension was gone, replaced by an enthusiasm so fake it was almost comical. "Clara, sweetheart, why didn't you say anything? It's magnificent. I always knew you had this in you." She reached across the table to grab my hand, but I gently pulled it away. "Did you, Mom?" I asked, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a boundless exhaustion. "Did you really? Because 5 minutes ago you told me I should give up on my little projects. You told me my role was to support my brother." My mother's face flushed. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that," I said. "And that's why I didn't tell you. Because I couldn't bear to hear your doubt one more time. I needed to believe in myself, and I couldn't do that while being constantly dragged down by my own family." Leo, realizing the ship had sailed, tried a different tack. He forced a brotherly grin. "Well, Clara, you did it. This is incredible. Hey, maybe Preston Urban Design could be the first angel investor in CryptoNect. Think of the synergy, the audacity was breathtaking." Even now, in the face of total humiliation, he was still looking for an angle. I looked him straight in the eye. "Leo, with all due respect, my firm will be investing in projects with sound business plans and a real chance of success. I wish you the best of luck with your venture." It was a polite dismissal, but the message was crystal clear: the ATM was closed for good. I stood up feeling as if I had shed a weight I'd been carrying for 30 years. "Mayor, thank you for coming. Mom, Leo, thank you for the birthday dinner. It was memorable." I placed a couple of $100 bills on the table to cover my share in the mayor's. Then I carefully picked up my model. It didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like my future. As Mayor Thompson and I walked out of the restaurant, leaving my mother and Leo sitting in stunned silence, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The confrontation was over, and for the first time in my life, I had won. Stepping out of the stuffy restaurant and into the cool night air was like breaking the surface after being held underwater for too long. My whole body felt lighter. The burden of trying to be someone I wasn't, of shrinking myself to make others feel big, was gone. "Are you all right?" Clara Mayor Thompson asked as we stood on the sidewalk, the restaurant's neon sign casting long shadows before us. I turned to him and broke into a real, genuine smile, the first one of the evening. "Mayor, I am better than all right. I am free." He nodded, a warm smile on his face. "Sometimes you have to tear something down to build something better. It's true of cities, and I suppose it's true of families." My phone started buzzing in my purse. I glanced at the screen. My mother. I silenced the call and put it back. A text immediately followed. "Clara, come back inside. We need to talk." I deleted it without finishing. That night, I didn't go back to my small apartment, a place filled with the ghosts of late-night calls consoling Leo, or absorbing my mother's subtle criticisms. Instead, I checked into a luxury hotel overlooking the very site where my Greenway project would soon take shape. I placed my model on the desk by the window, and for hours I just sat there looking at it and out at the dark rooftops of the industrial park, imagining the parks and pathways that would soon replace them. It was the first night in years I slept through without dreaming. The new dawn came quite literally the next morning. When I woke, my phone had exploded. There were 17 missed calls from my mother, 8 from Leo, and dozens of text messages. But there was other traffic, too. The mayor's office had issued the official press release at 6 a.m. My name was on the local news. My work email inbox was flooded with congratulations from colleagues who seemed both thrilled and shocked. One email stood out. It was from a world-renowned architect I had idolized since I was a student. "Dear Miss Preston, I just read about your Westwood Greenway project. Truly visionary. If you ever find yourself in need of a consulting partner, I would be honored to speak." I sat up in bed, coffee in hand, and cried. But this time they were tears of relief and validation. The world saw me. My expertise, my passion, it was real. It wasn't a hobby. I spent the day making practical moves. I called my boss and submitted my resignation, which was met with heartfelt congratulations. I called my lawyer to begin the process of incorporating Preston Urban Design. I called a real estate agent and started looking for both an office space and a new apartment somewhere untainted by the past. The immediate fate of my mother and Leo came in the form of a profound silence after the initial storm of messages. Once I failed to respond to their frantic, demanding calls, they stopped. Perhaps realizing their old tactics, urgency, and guilt no longer worked. I heard through an aunt that my mother had canceled a trip she had planned, claiming she wasn't feeling well. I knew it was shame. Leo had deleted his social media accounts after a local paper referred to him as the brother of planning prodigy Clara Preston, a role reversal his ego clearly couldn't handle. They were left in the small world they had created, one where value was measured in hollow promises and unfulfilled dreams. I, meanwhile, was stepping into a new world, one built on the solid bedrock of work, competence, and truth. And though I was starting over on my own for the first time, I didn't feel the least bit alone. I knew the real work was just beginning, and the best days were still ahead. 8 months later, I stood on a makeshift stage wearing a white hard hat with my company's logo, Preston Urban Design, on the side. Behind me stood a line of city dignitaries, including Mayor Thompson. In front of me was a crowd of reporters, community leaders, and interested citizens, all gathered on the sprawling plot of land that was once a desolate industrial park. Today was the official groundbreaking ceremony for the Westwood Greenway project. My life was unrecognizable. I no longer lived in that cramped apartment. I now resided in a modern downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the very creation I was bringing to life. My office, 2 blocks away, was a bright, open space where a team of 6 talented young architects and designers now worked with me. We weren't just working on the Greenway project. Other cities had begun to reach out asking for consultations on their own redevelopment projects. My name, once known only within the halls of City Hall, was now synonymous with innovation in urban planning. Architectural Digest ran a 4-page spread on me, and the project calling me a voice shaping the future of the American city. I was interviewed on podcasts, invited to speak at universities, and most importantly, I felt a deep, abiding sense of purpose every morning I woke up. It wasn't about the money or the fame. It was about manifesting a vision, about creating something meaningful and lasting. The evolution of my mother and Leo was more subtle and far more painful for them. Justice, it turned out, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the silence of a phone that never rings. After the initial few weeks of silence, they had begun their attempts to reconnect. They weren't apologies, but careful probes designed to see if the door was still open for them. My mother would send texts, "Just thinking of you. Hope you're well." Leo tried a more direct approach. He called once, feigning nonchalance. "Hey Clara, long time. I was thinking, now that you've got your own firm, maybe you're looking for a chief visionary officer." I had established firm boundaries. I responded to my mother politely but distantly. "I'm well, thank you. Things are very busy." I shut down Leo's proposal flatly. "Thanks, Leo, but we're fully staffed." The real consequences for them had been financial. When Leo's next venture, an AI-powered dating app, inevitably required capital, there was no Clara to review the numbers, and more importantly, no steady income from me that my mother had been secretly leaning on to bail him out. They had to sell my childhood home and move into a much smaller apartment. My mother had to go back to part-time tutoring to make ends meet. For the first time in his life, Leo had to face a real consequence. Without the family safety net, he had to get a real job. He was working in customer support for a cable company, a job he bitterly complained about at the rare family gatherings I attended. The indignity of having to solve other people's billing problems, he'd said, was unbearable for someone with my vision. About 6 months after the birthday dinner, my mother showed up at my office unannounced. She looked tired and older. "Clara," she said, looking around the modern space with awe, "this place, it's incredible." "Thank you, Mom," I said, keeping a professional distance. "What can I do for you?" Her eyes welled up with tears. "I need my daughter back. I was wrong, Clara. I was wrong about everything. I was so focused on what I thought Leo could be that I failed to see the incredible person you already were. I am so sorry." It was the apology I had waited my entire life to hear. And strangely, when it finally came, it didn't matter as much as I thought it would. It didn't erase 30 years of being overlooked. It didn't heal the scars. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, and I meant it. "But things are different now, Mom. I'm different. And we can't go back to the way things were." We were building a new relationship, a slow, deliberate one founded on respect instead of obligation. She was learning to see me as an independent adult, and I was learning to forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine. Now, as I stood on the stage, I saw them in the crowd. My mother and Leo standing near the back, looking out of place among the hopeful, excited faces. My mother was smiling a sad, proud smile. Leo was just watching his face, a complex mixture of resentment and, perhaps for the first time, a sliver of respect. When Mayor Thompson introduced me, the crowd applauded. I walked to the podium, looked out at the sea of faces, and then to the land that was about to be transformed. Justice wasn't seeing them fail. It was seeing myself succeed in spite of them. It wasn't about revenge, but about rebirth. And this was my rebirth, built on the very foundation of the bricks they had tried to cast aside. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, the applause felt like a distant wave. My focus was on the horizon line behind them, where the rusted skeletons of abandoned warehouses stood silhouetted against the bright morning sky. A graveyard of industry, soon to be a cradle of life. In that moment, a thought crystallized in my mind with the force of a revelation. Sometimes the greatest gift you can ever receive is the one you never wanted. For 30 years, I had wanted one thing: their approval. I had craved a simple acknowledgement, a nod from my mother and brother that said, "We see you, we value you." And for 30 years, it had been denied. That horrific birthday dinner, in all its calculated cruelty and casual humiliation, was the gift. It was the brutal, necessary act that finally shattered the illusion I had been living in. It didn't give me what I wanted, but it gave me something infinitely more valuable. It gave me the truth. It forced me to see that I had been begging for a seat at a table where I would never be welcome, a table so small it only had room for my brother's ego and my mother's vicarious dreams. The gift wasn't their validation. It was the liberation from needing it. The biggest lesson I learned wasn't about architecture or finance. It was about the architecture of the self. I realized that you cannot allow other people to be the architects of your worth. You cannot hand them the blueprints to your soul and hope they build you a palace. More often than not, they will build you a cage because it serves their narrative. It keeps their world orderly and predictable. You have to be your own architect. You have to draw your own lines, lay your own foundation, and defend the structural integrity of your being, especially when the demolition crew is your own family. Their approval was never the prize. My own self-respect was. After the ceremony concluded, after I had shaken hands and smiled for cameras, until my face ached, the crowd began to thin. My team was buzzing, already discussing the logistics of the first phase. Mayor Thompson gave me a proud, paternal nod before being swept away by his aides. And then I saw them approaching, navigating the uneven dirt lot, with a hesitation that was entirely new to them. My mother and Leo. My mother reached me first. The desperate, false enthusiasm from the restaurant was gone. In its place was a quiet, fragile awe. She looked at me then, at the massive cranes poised in the distance, then back at me. "I brought you something," she said, her voice soft. She held out a small framed picture. It was a photo of me as a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sitting on the floor, surrounded by Legos. A look of intense concentration on my face as I built a sprawling, chaotic city. I found this when we were packing up the house. I'd forgotten. "You were always a builder, weren't you?" It was the closest she had ever come to seeing the truth of me. Not the responsible one, not the safe one, but the builder. "Yes, Mom," I said, accepting the frame. "I always was." What you said at dinner, that you couldn't tell me because you couldn't bear my doubt. Her voice cracked. You were right. I was so afraid of Leo failing that I couldn't see you succeeding. I am so deeply sorry for the blindness that my fear created. It was the apology I had waited a lifetime to hear, and when it finally came, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a quiet, sorrowful peace accord ending a war that should never have been fought. Thank you for saying that, I said, and I meant it. We have a lot to rebuild, and it's going to be on a new foundation. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know. I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. Leo stood a few feet behind her, his hands shoved in his pockets. He looked smaller, diminished, without the spotlight of our mother's adoration. He shuffled his feet and wouldn't meet my eye. That speech was something he muttered. It wasn't a compliment, but it wasn't an insult either. It was a grudging admission of a reality he could no longer deny. Thanks, Leo, I said simply. He finally looked up, and for a fleeting second, I saw the brother I used to have, the one before the roles were assigned, before the competition started. You know, he said with a ghost of a self-deprecating smile, I think CryptoNect just officially went bankrupt. I offered a small, sad smile in return. Maybe it's time to build something real then. He just nodded and walked away. There was no request for money, no angle, no pitch. There was only the quiet, heavy acknowledgement that the game was over and the roles had been permanently reversed. Later that evening, I was alone in my loft. The framed photo my mother had given me sat on my desk next to the original model of the Greenway project. I looked at the little girl with the Legos, and I looked at the intricate professional model, and I saw the unbreakable thread that connected them. My passion hadn't been a hobby. It had been my identity waiting to be claimed. My mother's words from that night echoed in my mind, but they had lost their sting. Maybe it's time you gave up on these little projects. The irony was almost poetic. My project wasn't little, but I had been forced to make myself little to fit into their world. I had to shrink my ambitions, quiet my voice, and manage my successes so they wouldn't overshadow Leo's latest fantasy. The project's success wasn't just about building a park. It was about giving myself permission to take up space, to be as big and as brilliant as I was always meant to be. I know there are so many of you watching this right now who know exactly what that feels like. You're the responsible one. The reliable sibling, the dependable friend, the quiet employee who does the work while others take the credit. You are the foundation that allows others to build their monuments to themselves, and you are told to be content with your role in the shadows. You swallow your disappointments, you celebrate their minor victories as if they were your own, and you quiet that voice inside you that whispers, "What about me?" That voice is not selfish. That voice is not dramatic. That voice is your soul begging you to be your own architect. This journey taught me that true support is not about sacrificing your dreams for someone else's. That's called enablement. True support is creating a space where multiple dreams can coexist and flourish. I have that now. My team, my colleagues, the community leaders I work with, they are my new foundation. They don't see my success as a threat to their own. They see it as a shared victory. That is the kind of family everyone deserves, whether it's the one you're born into or the one you build for yourself. Have you ever had to make that impossible choice, the one between your own potential and the expectations of those you love? What was the moment you realized you had to stop shrinking and start building? I truly want to hear your stories in the comments below. Your journey is a testament to your own strength, and sharing it can be the blueprint for someone else who feels trapped. And if this story resonated with the builder inside of you, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe for more real-life stories of overcoming the odds, and share this video with anyone who needs to be reminded that their dreams are not little projects. Remember this: stop begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for you. Walk away. Pick up your tools, draft your own blueprints, and build your own damn table. Build it so strong that it becomes a legacy. Build it so magnificent that they have no choice but to see what they lost. Thank you for listening.